I wanted to share 3 stories with you, and these stories come from a beautiful and potent process of work that is called the Work That Reconnects, that I'm trained to facilitate. And these 3 stories are, I think, really important for our time to consider. Now, each story has a profoundly different lens through which we can look at the world, through which we understand the world, and through which we can engage with the world or not. So story number 1 is called Business as Usual. So this story is about the industrial growth society, and by that I mean our kind of current capitalist paradigm, our current kind of political, military, complex machine, if you like. And that's the kind of main story that we hear about right now in our media and in our world. And the central plot of this story is about getting ahead and gaining profit and power through growing the economy. Now that to me is not a sustained approach, because we only have one planet and a whole lot of resources that we're eating through really, really fast. So it's not a story that I want to prescribe to anymore. Because it's also a story that perpetuates patriarchy, white supremacy, and power for the few, while legitimising most of us, the majority of us, being disenfranchised. And that doesn't work for me anymore. That's not a story I want to tell. I want to be a role I want to be a hero in. The second story is called The Great Unravelling. Now this story, the central plot of this story, draws our attention to the disasters and the damage that's done to our world and to the peoples on it and all life on it by business as usual, by the industrial growth society. Now this story is told by journalists, scientists, activists who aren't buying into that, who aren't buying into that story as business as usual anymore, as the story that we can continue to tell if we're going to carry on going over the cliff in the way that we are, then okay. But I think most of us don't want to see that being the kind of conclusion of the story. So whichever way we look, we can see the kind of hallmarks of this particular story happening all around us. We just have to look at the changes in climate, all the fires, all the floods that we've had this year in particular. 5 hurricanes in the Atlantic all at one time, which is the first time that's ever happened that we know of. We're in the 6th mass extinction, and if any of you watched the extinction programme the other night on BBC One with David Attenborough, you'll kind of know very much what I'm talking about. Systemic racism and the Black Lives Matter, so many military conflicts and many, many more refugees all the time. Even pandemic, that's all part of this story of the Great Unravelling. Now, that might be a very depressing kind of story to be telling, but I think it's a very truthful one. But the story doesn't end there. For me, there is a third story that gives us all hope. It gives me hope, certainly. And this is the story of the transition from the industrial growth society told in the business as usual story that is unravelling in the story of the Great Unravelling. So it's the transition of that, the unravelling of it, to a life-sustaining society, which I'd like to take action towards making that being our reality, our new story, if you like. So in order for us to get to the great turning, we have to go through a great unravelling. So that puts it more in perspective for me, and actually makes the Great Unravelling less of a scary story, but more of a hero story, in that we can move from one place to the other. So we see shifts evidently all over the place. There are shifts evident to show that this great turning is happening. So we're moving from the idea of exploitation to respect, from consumerism to regeneration, from competition to cooperation. The story also sees the emergence of a new and creative human response. I mean, we can go to the moon, we can talk about going to Mars. Surely we can apply that creativity, that amazing gift of creativity that the human race has, to starting to kind of tell a new story, have something new emerge. We also see a reawakening of the sustainable indigenous wisdom or traditions. And there's a wider understanding of the interconnectedness of all life, and a widening understanding that we are nature. We are nature. We're not separate from it, and we can't have dominion over it, no matter how hard we might try under the business as usual. That will only lead to the great unravelling. So what story do you want to tell? Do you want to remain in business as usual? Do you want to stay in the great unravelling and get stuck there? Or do you want to start telling a new story with me and many others like me who believe there is a life-sustaining society in our midst if only we would start taking the action towards it? And we can all do that. We really, really can do all of that. So the Great Turning is also a story of the growing momentum of galvanised collective action for the sake of all life on Earth. So those are the three stories, and I know which story I'm occupying and trying to occupy. And within that story there are three dimensions. Within the story of the Great Turning there are three dimensions of that, and we may be involved in one of them or two of them or all of them. And that's going to be a story for another time. If you were interested to find out more about the body of work from which these three stories come from, and how you might be able to find the hero role you can play in the new story of the Great Turning, then please, please, please look up the Work That Reconnects, and I'll put a link below to the Work That Reconnects virtual events that I'm putting on while I'm co-facilitating. Check those out. This is really, really powerful work, and so important for our time, and really help frame where we're at and resource us all to start playing a role in the Great Turning. Bye bye for now from West Wales. Much love and many blessings to you.